Hey Bodgies and Widgies, and welcome back to the channel. We are finally in front of the 4-foot shallow aquarium, the home of my native Australian lungfish. It's been a really long time since we've seen this tank, and I'll be honest, I've kind of been neglecting just showing it off on video because I've started to realize how bare this aquarium basically is. Aside from my Australian lungfish, the amount of action that's been happening in this tank has just not been something that's really worth sharing, and I wanted to start to kind of go ahead and change that. Aside from my Australian lungfish, I started to realize that there's a pretty big deficit in the amount of native Australian fish that I'm currently keeping, and that sort of guilty conscience did start to go ahead and increase. So in today's video, I want to talk about some of my future plans for this aquarium and a really awesome new fish that I've added into this tank, which has really just ignited my passion for native Australian fish once again. Before we get into this video though, as always, let's acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and the people that are managing our land as well. So for those of you that have never seen this aquarium behind me, this is a custom built 4-foot shallow aquarium. It's 4 feet long, 2 feet wide and only a foot tall. And it's built by my local aquarium store, Aquatico Aquarium. I wanted this aquarium because I did have this intention of getting my Australian lungfish, but for the longest time this aquarium was actually fully planted. When I got my lungfish Neo, I then transitioned the aquarium to be an environment that's better suited for him. And from there, there's been a few different fish that have gone in and out of this tank. But for the longest time, it's just been my lungfish Neo, along with a few other non-native catfish species. We've got a few Bristlenose catfish in there, some Mystus vittatus catfish, along with a, what's the other one? A Raphael catfish. That's the final catfish in this tank. And they've been cruising pretty well ever since, but I'll be honest, there's not really anything that's like a wow factor in this tank aside from my Australian lungfish. Even then, that's a fish that only comes out for a few hours in the day total, and aside from that, if you were just to walk into this room, look at this tank, there would be nothing that you would see aside from just a bunch of driftwood and a bunch of water in the tank as well. And I wanted to go ahead and change that. So after making that decision of wanting to go ahead and add more native Australian fish into my 4-foot tank, I went to a few different local aquarium stores just to scope out the selection or the range of native fish they have. And I'll be honest, a lot of them didn't really have that many fish, or if they did, it would basically just be the two same species being repeated in every single store. Some of the species that I ended up seeing were fish like jade perch, which I didn't really want to add into this aquarium, just considering how boisterous and incredibly aggressive those fish can be with my previous experiences of keeping a jade perch. I was looking for more native Australian catfish species and potentially some smaller sized predator fish, and that's where I went to I can't even remember which aquarium store it was now, but they had a single fish which was basically waiting for me to go ahead and purchase it, and that was none other than a baby Macquaria nova maculata, also known as an Australian bass. The main reason that I wanted to go ahead and start off with an Australian bass in my 4-foot tank is because I know it's a fish that won't end up messing with my lungfish. It doesn't have any sharp teeth and it doesn't pick at my lungfish in any way, shape or form, and it's basically a top water predator. It does not care for whatever's on the bottom of the aquarium. If I add pellets to the top of this aquarium, he's immediately right there to go ahead and smash those pellets and couldn't care less about what happens underneath his eye level. So it's a perfect candidate to go ahead and add with my Australian lungfish, which at the end of the day is my biggest primary concern. But aside from that, I've really been loving this sort of quirky personality that this Australian bass has. Over the time that I've been feeding him, he's really getting accustomed to my presence, getting used to my fingers and associating them with food, which is kind of cool in one hand, but also very scary in the other. He's starting to sort of eye up and size up my fingers to see if they are a potential meal, and I'll be honest, I really do want to go ahead and get him hand training as well. He's gotten a lot more comfortable getting closer to my fingers during feeding time, but he eats like an absolute pig. He destroys pellets, and you can see just how fat he is now in some of the B-roll footage that you're seeing, but he is a chunky fish. And I can't wait to just go ahead and see him get bigger and bigger to really reach his full potential maximum size of around about 45 to 50 centimeters. And I think he'd be a great addition in a future aquarium project that I have planned, but that will be for a few years down the track. Now, if you have any further suggestions of any other native Australian fish I could add into this aquarium, or if you are looking at rehoming any Australian fish, feel free to let me know. And yeah, we could definitely work out something, and I'd love to hear your suggestions about potential species I could add into this tank. I've already got a few ideas like Tandanus catfish, I was considering a barramundi as well, and a few different other species like gudgeons that we could add, but I'd love to hear your insight. If you did have any further questions about this bass, make sure you let me know in the comments down below and what you thought about this video, and also consider subscribing if you want to see his progress about his growth or any updates about him going forward. But that's essentially it from me today. So as always, stay happy, stay safe, stay Aussie Australian. Bodgie out.